Fantastic. I'm just heating up some Isomalt, so I'm going to check on that too, but let me know if you can see me and hear me. Make sure everything is working good before we start. All right. Hi, guys. Hello, everybody. Let me know if everything sounds okay, everything looks okay, and we will get started. Welcome, welcome. Oh, good. I see some people jumping on. Hello, hello. Welcome to the live. Hey, Myra. How are you? Good afternoon or good morning. Hi. Hey, Deborah. Welcome. How's it looking? How's it sounding, everybody? Make sure we're all up and running okay before we begin. We are going to be doing some really fun stuff today. We're going to be working on our cookie. I have that here so you can see our beautiful engraved moon cookie. So we're going to be using the cookie itself. We're going to be airbrushing. We're going to be using the Yoda Pen. We're going to be using Isomalt. We're going to be painting by hand as well. So lots and lots of techniques are going to be packed into this demo today. Hey, Sabine. Okay, good. It sounds okay. Awesome. All right. Is anybody going to be following along today? I know some people got the accessory kits that went along with this project, which are still up on my website, if you want to use the exact kind of tools and the templates and everything that I am using. But of course, you can apply these techniques onto any different kinds of cookies, any theme, any shape, any style. So it makes it super duper fun. All right. Just checking on those comments. All right. Awesome. So yeah, we will go ahead and get started. I'm really excited to show you all of the different things that we are going to pack into this live demo today. So like I said, there's going to be a whole bunch of different elements to it, from the Isomalt to airbrushing to hand painting using the Yoda heat pen, and all of that is going to be done on our cookie, but we'll talk about lots of other designs and projects and things you can use. Hey Carol, how are you doing today? All right. All right, so the first thing that we are going to do for our project is we are going to make the brooch that's going to be sitting on top of the moon. So I just want to make sure that that's cooling as we're starting to do our engraving and our airbrushing and painting and all of that fun stuff. So that is going to be our first step. Let's see, Sabine's asking, how do I get the templates? I can send them to you, so if anybody's interested, just send me a message either here on Simi, on my personal page, send me an email, and I will send that template to you. It's just a, a basic template that I kind of drew up, and I can send that to you. If you got the accessory kit, it came in that, but if you didn't, that's fine too. I'll still give you the template. And so this is a paper template that I used for my cookie, and it also has the templates for the little star cookies as well, a big one and a small one, and so you can use those if you would like to. But it's a pretty decent size. I think it's about 5 to 6 inches, the moon that I'm using, and I just have it printed out here on paper, and I used that to cut it out. Okay, but of course you can use anything that you would like to, any shape or anything like that, or cutter that you already have. Hey Sharon, welcome, welcome. All right, perfect. Okay, so yeah, like I was saying, we are going to start with the brooch that is on top, so I'll show you guys that cookie one more time. So for the cookie itself, you can see he is cookie, so there's the back of it. And I did airbrush the cookie, so I'm going to be talking all about how I'm airbrushing it. There's nothing else on the cookie other than paint, so we're actually painting directly on the surface for that blue. We're painting directly on the surface of it, so I'll show you all of my tips and tricks for that, some shading, getting that really full coverage, so that you really can't tell at first glance that it is a cookie. It just gives you that complete full coverage over top of it. And then we're also going to be engraving all of these designs on the surface of the cookie using the Yoda heat pen, which I've just started to preheat. I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. And then we are going to be hand painting a lot of the details as well, and then pouring that beautiful floral brooch that's going to be in the center of the moon. So that is where we are going to start, and I'm going to go ahead and lower the camera down. Of course, if you guys have any questions throughout the whole demo, please let me know. I have my iPad set up down here so I can see your comments, and then Mom will also be here, and she will be able to shout out any questions that you guys have as well. She'll be looking over the chat. So any questions that you have throughout the demo, please let me know, but we're going to go ahead and turn the camera down so that you can see. All right. Okay, so there is my work area. So I have my Simi Isomalt. So of course Simi Isomalt is pre-cooked, it's ready to use, so all you have to do is melt it. So I just pop this in the microwave for 30 seconds and then 15-second intervals after that until it is all completely melted down. That is how we're going to make our brooch. So I've started preheating that, but I'm just going to check on it to see if it needs any longer time, because I just kind of popped it in to get it started. Nope, seems like it should be good. So with our Isomalt, we always bring this to a boil, so anything that you're pouring in Isomalt, you want to make sure that there's no air bubbles or air pockets in it, which means I'm not stirring it as I'm melting. I do melt in intervals, checking it about every 15 to 30 seconds, but you don't want to stir it in between because you will mix in more air, so just make sure that you are just looking at it, seeing if it's boiling or not, and if it's not, pop it back in. And then I am going to go ahead and bring this to a nice boil. Once it's boiling, we take it out of the microwave and we let it settle and sit at room temperature for just a couple minutes. It actually settled in the microwave, which is fine too, but you can see that even though it is very liquid right now, it's not actively boiling and bubbling, which is going to be good because we don't want to transfer and pour any of the bubbles that are boiling into your finished piece. So as you can see, I've melted it, brought it to a boil to get the air out, but then I let it settle. So all of that air rises and pops, and now it is completely ready to use. Okay, of course you're being very careful when working with Isomalt, right, because it is about 300 degrees, so you don't want to stick your finger in it, you don't want to touch it. I do highly recommend wearing gloves when working with the Isomalt so that it protects your hand, usually just a cotton glove, and then like a nitrile or latex glove over that is going to be best. So I'm just going to set this bag off to the side here. And we will get our mold ready. So of course this is one of our beautiful Simi molds. I really love this one because it has such a nice flow to it. You can use it in so many different ways, and it has that really pretty sort of jeweled gemmed flower in the middle, and then these really nice vines that come apart from it. So that is what we're going to use kind of with the flow of the moon cookie, and I'm going to fill that in first. So I'm just going to pour enough to kind of cover all of the main areas of the mold. And again, this is a Simi mold that you can get on our website, but you can use any high heat food safe silicone mold for this. I'm going to use my little silicone tool just to spread it into all the cracks and crevices, but you can use a toothpick or a skewer. And I'm just kind of pushing it into all the points. This mold does have a lot of points at the tips of those leaves, the gems in the leaves and the flowers, so I want to just make sure that that's all spread in there really nicely. And I'm not worrying about the rough edges because I will get rid of those afterwards. I'll show you guys how to smooth everything over. So mostly just worry about getting the whole cavity of the mold filled. And then we are going to lightly pop any bubbles on the surface. So just kind of lightly torching. And we will basically just let that cool. So this one we are pouring just in the clear Isomalt, and then we're going to paint the whole thing to match with the moon. Since the moon is all hand painted and airbrushed as well, rather than the actual dough being colored or the you know, like piping or anything like that, I wanted the brooch to match really well with it, so we're also going to paint it. That way it's going to kind of have that similar sort of painterly look, plus it gives us a lot more freedom for how we can customize the look of the piece. So that way, you know, we can kind of get it all cohesive in our finished piece. So just checking out the comments. Hey Matthew, hi Bev, hey Kate, welcome. All right, we just started out by pouring our brooch for our cookie moon here that we are going to be creating. So I just poured that in clear Isomalt, and then we will paint it after to match the moon. So that is going to take about probably 5 to 10 minutes to cool at room temperature because it is not very thick, it's not very deep, and it is fairly cool in this room today. So it's going to take probably like 5 to 7 minutes in actuality. So we'll just put that guy off to the side. We don't need that until a little bit later, so we will pop that out once we're ready. All right, so next up, we are going to be working on our actual cookie. So I'm going to put my Isomalt off to the side. You can see just how fast that went. The Isomalt portion of this is really quick, especially if you were to color the Isomalt. You don't have to do the intricate hand painting like I did. You could do it all one color, you know, or pour the stones one color, let it cool, and then pour the rest of it in like a silver or a gold for the frame. You can kind of take some of the work out of it that way if you want this to be done a little bit faster, but I want to kind of show you guys the intricate ways that I'm going to be painting it, so that's why I did it all in clear, just to make it easier on myself. All right. Bev says, wait, is that a new mold? We've had this one for a little while, but I haven't used it lately in as many projects, and that's why I thought it would be perfect, because I love this one. There's also another one that's very similar to it. I believe the center is a little bit more of like a brooch sort of look, and it has those tendrils. So this is one of my favorites, though, of our molds, because it's just so pretty. And again, that flow is going to bend really nicely. Another thing you can do if you're not using this specific template, and maybe your moon is a little bit more crescent, like it's curved more, what you can do is take this out of the mold a little bit early, and you can bend it even more, or even bend it less. If you wanted more of like a border or something like that that's not actually curved, you can unbend the slight curve that it has and use it as more of a straight piece, which is really pretty. You know, would be really pretty for like the strap of a shoe or something like that as well. But yeah, I love this one.
So Sidney, could you also make the gem mold in cookie?
Yeah, absolutely. If you wanted this to all be cookie instead, you can make this out of cookie itself. So you can bake in any of our molds because they are high heat for Isomalt, any of our high heat molds. You can bake in them because they are high heat for Isomalt, so that means that they work with baking cookies in them. So I would actually just put the dough right in, bake it in the mold, and then when it pops out, it'll keep all of the beautiful facets. And because we are not piping over these pieces today, we are just painting on the cookie itself, then you could maintain all those facets. You would still have all the detail there, and it would look really, really beautiful. So if you wanted to do this without the Isomalt portion, you could definitely do that, or you can make this in modeling chocolate, have a yummy chocolate brooch on top. You can make it out of fondant or gum paste. Gum paste, if this is going to be an edible cookie, you know, that somebody is actually going to eat, would be a little hard, but fondant would definitely work really nice. But of course, for display, you could use anything that you wanted to. So definitely a versatile piece depending on what you're planning to do. And this is all edible, you know, all the paints, all the Isomalt, the cookie and everything is edible, but because of the work that went into this one and just, you know, the intricacy of it, this would be kind of the focal point in your spread. And then you could always do more simple cookies around it. So like I have these little guys here that I made an airbrush the same way. So these are just little cookies as well, and I just airbrush those to match. So you could have little, you know, more, you know, eating cookies around it and have this as the focal point that they could save, or you can make these in different versions, or, you know, have them as the actual edible cookies as well. What I did for my recipe is I used my construction gingerbread, or my sculpted gingerbread recipe that's on my website. So it is pretty durable, it's pretty hard and strong, and that is what I use because I mostly do display cookies, so it's going to be, you know, things that I want to hold on to for a while. But you can potentially do this in any recipe that you have. As long as the cookie is pre-baked and cooled, you can use any recipe that you have. So if you want something more flavored or something like that, you definitely can do that, and that way it is going to give you, you know, options for actually making a platter or a spread for somebody to have on their dessert table. All right. So, as you guys can see, here is our cookie. So the cookie, I just, like I said, used my construction gingerbread recipe. I used the template, so again, if anybody needs the template, just let me know and I can send that to you. Just send me a private message or a message here on Simi or an email or anything. You guys know how to get a hold of me. So I will send you, and it has the template for this, as well as the 2 different sizes of the little stars. And that's all I used on my dough. Is I just rolled it out, probably about a 1/4 inch thick, and then I cut out my template, baked it, and then you can smooth the edges or sand them, or use like a zester on the edge of it to smooth out the edges if you need to. But as long as you don't have a dough that's going to spread too much, it should hold the shape really nicely. So if you do cookies, you probably already have a recipe that you use, you know, for more holding the shapes that you need. Okay, so I just baked that, I let it cool and cleaned it all up, and it is all ready to go. Now, as you can see, I've sketched a little template onto my cookie. Now, if you are going to be making these, you know, for people to eat instead of mine today, which is just display, you can use a food marker for that. Totally fine. You can even scratch in like a little design with a cookie scribe or a toothpick if you know, kind of scrape it hard enough, or if your dough is dark enough to see the scratches in it. But a edible marker would work really well for this. Because I'm just doing a display, I just use a non-toxic pencil, and that's what I use, just again because nobody's going to eat this, but you can use a edible marker for this, just to give you an idea. Now you can use my design exactly if you'd like to. If you got the accessory kit, you got a picture of the piece, so if you want to use that as a template, you know, you can kind of trace that and put it onto the piece, or you can freehand it, or you can look up different designs if you want to. This one's actually kind of a funny story because this was going to be my test piece, because I usually, you know, as I'm playing around with different pieces, I try out different things, and I couldn't decide on this piece if I wanted to do more like vines, like I have on the top, or if I wanted to do more like the leaves the leafy vines that I have on the bottom. So I did it half and half, and then it ended up that I loved it exactly how it was, so I just used it half and half. So that's why we have the more leafy vines at the bottom and more of like the almost like husk sort of leaves at the top. And so you could definitely copy this. You can do all one, so it'd be really pretty if it was all the leaves or all of these more like it almost has like a corn husk sort of look. I think it's really pretty, or like wheat up there. So you could definitely do either one. Instead, you can go completely different way and make it your own custom piece. It's really up to you what you would like to do, but I did the half and half because I ended up actually really liking how asymmetrical it was, because it just brought a little bit more interest. Plus, it gives me more things to show you guys. So that is what I just lightly sketched. What I did originally is I just took the brooch after it was made, so I took this out and I traced it on the cookie so that I knew exactly where it was going to sit, and then I drew in, I just freehanded the design onto it. And so if you need an exact kind of placement of where your brooch is going to go, you can wait for this to cool a couple more minutes and then set it on top and trace it with your food marker or your pencil. But because I did the first one, I kind of knew where the design was going to go, so I just freehanded this on there so that it is ready to carve.
I love it. Bev's going to put her skulls on it.
Oh, I love that. This would be perfect. I kind of wanted to do something that was a little bit more like a little darker and a little bit more moody of a theme, so that's why I did more like deep colors rather than, you know, my normal bright and happy colors that I usually do. So I wanted to do something a little bit more like different than my normal style, which I really enjoyed doing. It's good to mix it up. I think the skulls would be perfect for that. Okay, I'm glad you guys are back. Sorry about that, but we're going to continue right where we are. The show must go on, right? So as we were talking about, I have the cookie, and that is going to be engraved. So I penciled on the design. You can use your edible marker, and now we are going to engrave onto it using the Yoda Pen. Okay, does it look like everything's back on? Okay, just making sure. All right. So what we're going to do is we are going to be using the Yoda Pen for this today. So the Yoda Pen is an absolutely incredible tool. So it's basically like a heat engraver, like a wood burner or something like that, except it's all food safe. It was all designed by the incredible Myra Estrada. She created this Yoda Pen, and it's really, really unique, really revolutionary because you can engrave onto edible mediums using the different tips and using the heat. And that way you can engrave onto cookie itself, you can engrave onto chocolate, you can engrave onto ganache, onto Isomalt. You can even experiment with like fondants and gum paste. It gives it a beautiful, beautiful engraved, again, sort of like a wood burn sort of look. So that is what I'm going to be doing today, because you could potentially just paint this on. You know, if you don't have the Yoda Pen, it's okay. You can paint on the details, but the Yoda really, really makes the depth of it pop. It gives it such a unique look, and it gives you something to follow along with your hand painting that's a little bit easier. So kind of like almost creating your own templates and then go back and highlight with the paint. So I really, really love the engraved look of the cookies, and that's what I wanted to illustrate for you guys today. All right. So I have this preheating, and so you can see I have it on its little stand here, and I just have my pen preheating. For cookies, you can adjust it a little bit depending on what you want. I usually start everything out around, let me see what I put this at, it's between like around 150 and 100, somewhere between there, and I'll kind of alter that as I go depending on how well it burns and it melts into the cookie. So I just have had that preheating about 10 minutes, so I started it right before we began. And that way it is going to be nice and warm, but it really doesn't take long to heat up. I did put a tip into it, so you can use any of the tips that is comfortable for your design. It really depends if you want something more rounded, if you want something more flat, depending on the way that you're going to be carving. But this Yoda Pen comes with a whole bunch of different tips. So you can see there's like more knife edges, there's ball tools, there is skinnier tips, there's wider tips, so you have tons and tons of different options. Plus, we actually also have here the new tips that Yoda Pen just came out with. So these are for some more intricate sculpting. So there's some really cool like rounded tips, there's some flatter tips, there's some bigger ball tools, and so you can use any of the tips that's going to kind of work for you for what you are doing, because it'll depend on the way that your design is. If you're doing something that's more straight lines, you may want to have more of a straight edge. If you're doing something that's more curved, you may want to have more of that rounded edge. If you're doing a lot of dots or polka dots, you may want a ball tool. So it's kind of up to you which one you want to do. Just remember, if you're switching tips, that you let the pen pen cool in between because it's going to be very, very hot. So, you know, as you're switching the tips on the pen, make sure that you turn it off and you let it cool really, really well before you switch those off, because of course the tip is going to be very, very hot. So I'm just going to use this little angled tip. This one is one of my favorites, but again, play around with the different thicknesses and the different angles because everybody kind of has their own preference of what's easier on your wrist to do that. Yes, it is available on our site, Sandra. Okay, hey Patricia, how's it going? All right, so we are going to start engraving onto our cookie now. So basically, let's just get this cord somewhere I can handle it. So basically, we are just going to drag our lines, just like we were using a paintbrush, onto our cookie, okay? It makes it really, really easy. And you can go lighter at first just to get an idea of kind of where everything is going to go. But I'm just going to kind of go for it, just for time's sake. Okay, and the harder you press, the deeper the line is going to go. And with carving like this, depth is really your, it's kind of like your guide to how dark the lines will be. The deeper that you make the lines, the more shadowed they're going to look and the more prominent they're going to look. So if you want darker, deeper, more intense lines, you can not only go wider with the tip, but you can also go deeper into your medium. If you want something that's a little bit more subtle, you want to go more shallow. So what I like to do is just start out by putting all my vines in, and then I'll go back and add the leaves. And I'm not only turning my wrist, but I'm actually turning the cookie. So if you wanted to do this on a turntable, you could. This is light enough weight that I really don't need it, but if you have a turntable handy and you want to use that, you definitely can. So I'm just going to start putting those lines in. Alright, and you can go as slow or as fast with this as you want. That is the beauty of the Yoda Pen. Because I've already kind of done this, I know an idea of where I want everything to be, so I'm able to go a little bit quicker. But you can take your time with it. And I'm just going to put little lines down the middles of each of the leaves. And we're going to go back and highlight these with paint as well. So you can kind of start to see the scratches in the surface of those lines that I put in. Alright, so just kind of going around, adding in those little points. I like to do some lines coming off of these leafy vines because it kind of gives it like a ivy sort of look.
Sid, I have a question.
Yeah.
Personally.
Yeah.
You don't have to wipe off the cookie like you do, like if you did chocolate or Isomalt?
I don't really find that I get as much buildup with the cookie because the cookie has more air in it. It tends to just press down rather than building up on the tip because it's dough, so it rises and it becomes a little bit more light as far as like the density of it. I don't find that it builds up, but you definitely can wipe it off on a damp towel. You can dampen the little sponge that comes with the holder. You can wipe it on a mat. And it's really, really easy to clean up that way, but I find that this one doesn't build up on cookie as much because, again, it's pressing more down into itself rather than actually coming off of the piece.
Oh, fascinating.
Yeah. Alright, so I'm just doing my little cookie shapes, and I did very, very light, or very basic, I should say, leaf shapes, so it's basically just like a half a teardrop with a line down the center, but the cool part is you can really customize this and get it as intricate as you would like with the different sizes of tips. One thing to think about too is this is just like drawing, so line weight is really important. So like I talked about, the depth of the line will also alter how dark it looks. The line weight will as well, and line weight is just a fancy way of saying how wide the line is. So if you think of like cartoony sort of designs, like comics and things, you know, a lot of the more defined areas or the outlines of things, they will use a heavier line weight, which just means it is a wider line. And then where they want things to be a little bit more delicate or a little bit more subtle, they'll use skinnier lines or more fine tips. And so you can play around with that as well, because that will make a big difference in where your emphasis goes. Okay, but I'm just kind of getting my lines in there. I'm not really like strictly following the lines that I drew on. I'm, you know, making sure that it looks good to the eye as well. It can be a little bit hard to keep track of once you start getting a lot of lines in there, but remember you can kind of drag your finger over it and feel it. And you can always go back and add more if you find areas that need it. Okay, so I'm just dragging in those lines. I'm doing the more elongated vines at the top here. And the paint is also going to help to sharpen the lines as well, because right now there's a lot going on. We have the color of the cookie, which isn't totally consistent because of course the edges are going to start to cook a little bit more, so you get those nice golden brown edges, but you have that variation going on visually. You also have the lines that I put in, which may not be super perfect, so it can look a little bit busy at first, plus you have all these indents and these engraved lines that you're putting in. So as you go, it'll get looking a little bit messier, but just, you know, hold out, trust the process, because as you start to refine this and pull it all together, it really just sharpens up and makes it look beautiful. Okay, so I'm just dragging in those lines for what I think is my last vine here. Look at it a little closer. Awesome, I may add a couple more lines just to add some veining. Now you don't have to have your template on there like I drew on there. You can definitely just freehand this. If you are good at freehanding, I like to kind of have a direction of where I'm going. So that's why I like to use templates. Even though I did freehand it, I just had an idea once I went in with my Yoda where everything was going to go. Alright, so I'm just looking at this a little bit closer. And you can see how fast that was. That was like 5 minutes, not even, of carving into the surface. So it's really just making sure that you have all of the lines, you know, smooth and they're all looking good. Another thing I'll do with cookies specifically, because it is a porous medium, is sometimes I'll go over and I will just smooth the surface. So if you're doing a cookie that somebody's going to eat, of course you don't want to use sandpaper because it's sandpaper. So usually you would use like a zester or a really fine like grinder that you can go over the surface, but because this is a display, I'm just going to lightly smooth the surface. Okay. And that's not necessary, but I find that sometimes it smooths over my design a little bit so it's totally flat on the top. And if I had any excess pieces of cookie or anything, it just helps it to look a little bit more refined. Okay, just get some of that crumbs away. All right, and that is pretty much it. You can see just how fast that's going to give you a completely unique design on your moon. So I know that it's a little bit messy right now, but like I said, once we paint it, it's really going to make it pop. So just having that overall color is really going to make everything come to life. All right, so that is that. We're going to turn off our Yoda pen and just let that cool off to the side here. Remember not to touch it until it is cool. So I'll just put that guy over there. And now we're going to start our painting. All right, let's actually take out our Isomalt piece first, because that way we can just do all the painting at once. How about that? All right, any questions so far? You guys doing okay? That Yoda pen really just makes it so fast and so quick to put together your engraved cookie. You can even, if you wanted to go along the edges, it'll melt into the edges of the piece, not just the surface. So if you wanted to add like a scalloped edge or, you know, some markings or some carving out at the edges, you can really take your time with this, go more in depth, you know, kind of like smooth out and build up areas. This is kind of like a reduction carving, so you're just taking out more and more of the piece, like a marble sculpture. You know, you chip away little bits at a time, and you can get some really intense carving effects, or you can get more of this sort of etching and engraving effect that I have in mind. So really the sky is the limit to how much you can go into this. All right, hey Heather, hi Taisha, welcome. All right, so this piece is cool, but I'm just testing it with a silicone tool, make sure it's nice and solid, and then you can see it's popping right out of the mold, has that beautiful reflection. And those little rough edges that I have on the sides, I am going to clean those up by just torching over those lightly. So I put the piece face down to protect all of that beautiful facet and detail in the surface. And I'm just going to lightly trace the edges with my torch to help them smooth themselves over. So again, it's face down, so you don't want to torch over the facets in the detail, because this one is a very intricately detailed mold with all of those stones, so you don't want to melt those away. That's why I put the piece face down, to protect them from the heat. And then that just smooths over. It's a little bit hard to see before it's painted, but just comes out so pretty and sparkly. And that will be perfect to go on to our moon. All right, so we are going to do some airbrushing next. So So I'm going to move everything. I'm going to put some paper towels down as well. Here. Okay. So we're going to be airbrushing this, but if you don't have an airbrush, you can use just the paint itself and hand paint this. Airbrushing is just a little bit faster and more even, and it can give us some softer looks. So I am, of course, using my Dinky Doodle airbrush. This is my absolute favorite airbrush to use, and it's the one that we have on our site because it's just so versatile. You can go really wide, you can go really fine, and it's really easy to use. It's quiet, it's portable, I love it. So that is what we're going to be using, as well as the Simi Color Splash colors. I have a little bit of paint on my labels, as you can see, but we are using those Simi Color Splash colors, and that is going to give us the colors that we want. Today we're using Ocean Blue and Base White, and that's going to give us a really nice, you know, kind of variety of shades because we can customize them. So if you haven't used the Simi Color Splash before, they are a water-based edible color, so they're basically the same idea as an airbrush color, but these are super highly pigmented. So what that means is they're very deep, they're very dark, and that gives you a lot of customizability to make your own shades. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be using the blue mixed with the white, and that's not only going to lighten the blue so that I have more of a pastel blue at first, but the white is also going to turn it into an opaque paint. So if I were to just airbrush a water-based color, a regular water-based color, over top of my dark cookie, what's going to happen is you'll get the blue, but it's going to be over top of that brown. So it will muddle the colors a little bit. It'll be really dark. It won't really have that light, airy look that I want for this piece, for the base of it. So what we want to do is we want to mix it with the base white, and the base white is more like, it's a much thicker consistency and texture, and it's more like an edible acrylic paint, like a very loose acrylic paint. So what that's going to do is it's turning the watercolors essentially into solid colors that can actually paint over any color. So even if this cookie was deep dark brown or was black, you can layer the colors on top and still get light bright colors. I could do yellows, I could do just whites, and it would really make those colors pop. All right, so we have a little cup here that we're going to start our paint in before we add it to the airbrush. And I'm also going to be using some dilution solution. So if you got the set with this, or if you have the full set of our colors, basically this is going to be our thinner. It's like our clear edible paint thinner, and that is going to just make sure that the white is going to be thinned out so that it does not clog the airbrush, because it is a thicker consistency and texture. You just want to make sure that you are using this to thin out the texture. But let's say you wanted to make a lighter blue, but you didn't want to add the opacity of the white. You can also just add dilution solution to the colors instead of the white and lighten the colors that way, so it would still be transparent. So again, this is just a clear edible paint thinner. You could use water if you don't have the dilution solution, but the dilution solution paints on a lot smoother and it dries a lot faster, so that's why I am using the dilution. All right. So we're going to put that off to the side. We are going to do a 1-to-1 ratio. So again, because this is a thick white color, we want to do a thinned out 1-to-1 ratio about. It'll depend on how wide your nozzle is for this airbrush, but because I do have a little bit of a smaller tip on mine, I want to thin it out in a 1-to-1 ratio. If you have a much wider nozzle, you can experiment with changing up that ratio, but 1-to-1 is kind of a good starting point. So we're going to do, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Yeah, let's start with 20 drops of the white. And then you can also substitute any other color as a thinned out medium. So if I wanted to do 20 drops of blue, that would be fine because it's going to thin out that white, but that would be way too much blue, especially because our ocean blue is so intense. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with 19 drops of the dilution solution and 1 drop of the blue, if that makes sense. So we're going to count here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. And then 1 drop of our ocean blue, because that is such a dark color. I'm just going to use my little cookie scribe to stir it. You can use a paintbrush or whatever you have. You want to stir it really well because you really want that white to get emulsified. Now if you wanted to make this a little bit more mystical, a little bit softer, you can add a touch of the red, the candy apple red, and it will kind of turn it to more of like a purpley powder blue. This way will be a little bit more of like a light sky blue, which will be really pretty for this. But if you wanted to make it more of like a dusty blue, just add And by a little bit, I mean just maybe wipe this off and dip this into the red and then stir that in. You don't want to put a whole drop because then you'll get purple, deep purple. But any color that you want to do, if you have the whole set or you have other, colors that you want to use, but that base white really does make a difference in how this is going to come out. So I want to go ahead and make sure that is mixed with my normal Simi Color Splash colors. All right, so that gave me a beautiful opaque blue. We are going to load that into our airbrush. All right. Let's try and set him somewhere he's not going to run away. All right. So I'm not going to put all my paint in there. I'm just going to do a little bit. I'm going to start by testing it off to the side on the paper towel, making sure the color is good, and that's what I want. And now we're just going to lightly start coating. Now, because we did thin out the base white, it's not as opaque, but it's still extremely opaque. So you can see that it's already giving a very bright tint to the cookie, but we want to build up the layers to build up the opacity, and that's going to cover up our dark lines from the stencil, or like the little template that I had put on. So cookie is very porous, so you can do fairly thick layers of paint. It'll absorb it really nicely. And then I'm also making sure I'm going to the edges, because we don't want those edges to stay brown. So I'm not only kind of angling at the side, but I'm flipping my whole cookie the other way around, because airbrushing is very dependent on airflow and air movement. So if I only airbrush from one side, you may not be getting a full coverage. You can use that on purpose sometimes for some certain shading aspects, but for this I just want a nice coat. So not only am I going around and doing the edges from this angle, but I'm also going over the cookie itself one more time to get in any crevices that I may have missed. Alright, so with airbrushing, you want to make sure you're doing very smooth layers. Whenever I airbrush, I always start moving and keep moving before and after I turn the airbrush on. So basically, if you start in one spot, you turn the airbrush on, you start moving, and then you stop before you turn the airbrush off. You see how I have darker spots on either side? So you want to start moving, turn your airbrush on, and then stop the airbrush but keep moving. And so that's going to kind of fade out the edges, and you get a lot more even coverage that way. Alright, just keeping my color swirling. I'm not pulling back on it, I'm just sloshing it around a little bit to make sure it's staying nice and mixed. Okay, going from those different angles, and you see how by adding those layers, this is only maybe 2 layers if you kind of put it all together of paint, and you can see how opaque that is. So that's another good part about these colors being so intense, is you don't need very much. They go a lot longer way than something that's really diluted, and you do have to build up so many layers of paint to get the shade that you want. Okay, so just going around those edges. And I would say that's a pretty good coverage. I don't need to do too much more. Again, it only took maybe 2-3 minutes to get that full coverage onto my cookie. So again, that's where we started, of that brown, and then this is where we are now. Okay. One thing that I do want to do is I want to create a slightly darker shadow around the outside. So you can either pour this paint back into your cup and mix everything all together, or you can just add another drop of the blue right into my excess. So I don't have as much in there anymore, obviously, because I poured some out. So I'm going to put a drop, kind of carefully stir it around in my cup. This one, it doesn't matter as much if there is as much white in it, because we already got our base color, and so a darker blue, even if it was totally transparent, will stand out on this lighter blue. So now I'm just going to run out the excess light blue that I had until we get to that darker stuff. And I may want to go even a little bit darker. Let's see. So you can really see how far the color goes. There we go, we're getting to that darker stuff. Let's add a couple more drops in there. Especially with the white, it just, there we go. it really goes a long way. But now we started to get that darker blue. You can even add a little bit of black in there if you wanted to. I can mix up a shade of black to get it really deep. But now we're just going to trace the edges. And this is very subtle, but it's going to do a lot for the shading of the piece. And just making it look a little bit more detailed and like a little bit more time was put into it, even though it's really only taking about 10 more seconds of our time. So just a little trick there to make your cookies, when they're airbrushed, or really any airbrush piece that's 2D like this, just make them look like you took a little bit more time without actually really having to do much more to it. So I'm making sure I get those edges as well. But I'm leaving the center the light blue. So you see how I'm just tracing the edges. Once it's off this paper towel, it'll be a little bit easier to see. All right. And there we are. So sometimes to help it dry in between, I'm not putting any paint on it. I'm just using the airflow from the airbrush to help dry that off. But because these are so much more pigmented than normal airbrush colors, they do dry faster because there's less water in them. And there we go. You could do the back of it if you wanted to, but nobody's going to see that, so I am not worried about it at all. All right. And there is our beautiful full coverage cookie. So if you wanted to, you know, have a really, really fast alternative to making your cookies without, you know, having to ice or flood or anything like that, airbrushing is so quick. It saves you time. You know, it's very consistent and it has that soft look. Now, if you wanted to, if you didn't have the airbrush, you can absolutely just take that paint that you mixed up on a paintbrush. You'll need a little bit more because the brush needs more in order to cover, but I would probably mix up maybe about double, and I would just use a wide paintbrush and just paint that on the surface. That would definitely work. It would still give you a beautiful full coverage. The only difference in it would be that when you wanted that soft taper into the darker color, you wouldn't really have that softness because brush strokes are a lot more harsh. So you would just want to kind of go around the edges with your paintbrush and, you know, just make more of a defined border rather than that soft fade into the lighter color in the middle. And again, you can see it's very subtle. So it's not really anything you would even notice at first glance, but when you see the difference of just having that lighter blue in the middle and the darker blue on the edges, this one I went a little bit lighter, but that'll be cool because we can kind of have differences in, you know, doing different layers. This one I went a little bit lighter blue, but I still really like this. I think it'll be really bright and intense, which is a little bit easier for you guys to see on camera too. All right. And you can also see how it made those lines pop. You cannot see the dark marker or pencil that I did anymore. From up close I can tell that shadow that you're seeing is just from the indents in the lines, okay? So that blue kind of being airbrushed on at every angle, it just made those lines really pop beautifully. Okay, so we are going to give that a couple minutes to dry before we do our last hand painting on it of just making those lines a little bit more defined with some green, but that way we can start painting our brooch in the meantime. So we'll put him off to the side. All right, so we're going to grab some more paper towels here to paint our brooch on. Now you can airbrush the brooch as well. Isomalt airbrushes beautifully, but I wanted to show you guys some different techniques, so we are going to hand paint instead of airbrushing this time. All right, I have my palette. Again, you could use whatever you like. Little cups are fine, but because we're doing more colors in this, I just want to go ahead and use my palette. Now, we are going to want the brooch to stay a little bit more glassy and a little bit more shiny rather than the opaque paint that we were using before. Again, that's just personal preference, but I wanted that contrast of the more glassy sapphire gem to the more opaque matte of the moon. So I'm going to not use the base white for this. I'm just going to be using the color by itself. So I'm going to add a little bit of the blue, just a drop because we don't need very much, on a detail brush here. And we are going to paint those stones. So I don't want very much, I just need a little. And I'm just going to paint that blue. And again, if you wanted it a lighter color, but you didn't want the opacity of the white, that's when the dilution solution would come in. So I can mix some of the clear dilution with this, and it would lighten the color while still keeping it clear and glassy. Okay, so that's just right out of the bottle. You don't have to add anything, you don't have to do anything as long as you are happy with that shade. It just gives us a beautiful crystal blue. If I wanted that darker, I can let this dry for 5 or 10 minutes and then go back and do another coat, or I can mix some black into this to darken it. The color splash comes with, if you got the whole set, it comes with a guide, a color guide, and I believe it's on our website too, or you can always message me and I will send it to you. But it comes with a color mixing guide, so if you want to mix up like blacks and browns and things like that from the colors that you have. We really wanted these to be customizable, and that way you don't have to have, 800 different bottles lying around with different shades that may not match each other, because these are all coming from one bottle for different shades of blues or reds or whatever you're doing. It's always going to be cohesive. Another cool thing about these colors is they can also be mixed in. So if you wanted to pour this whole thing in blue Isomalt, I could have put a couple drops into my Isomalt when it was melted, stirred it in, and then poured my brooch with blue Isomalt. And then all you have to do is go back over it with some silver, and you can do the whole thing, a little bit faster. But I wanted to break it up and do some different colors. That's why we are hand painting, because we're going to have some greens and some silvers. Alright, you can also mix this color into your dough. So again, if you want to eliminate a step and you're okay with it just being one color rather than having that soft fade of the lighter color in the center, you can just color your dough as well. So you can mix the color into the dough as you're making your gingerbread or your cookie dough or whatever you're doing, and it takes to it beautifully. And that way, if you use it for the brooch as well, it's also going to make sure that it is cohesive. So your brooch on top would match.
And royal icing too?
Yeah, and if you're going to flood these cookies, it mixes into royal icing. You can also mix it into buttercream. Anything that's compatible with a water base will work. So things like chocolate need more of an oil base, but anything that's compatible with water works really beautifully with these. You can paint this on top of modeling chocolate because modeling chocolate has water in it. The corn syrup adds something for it to bond to, so you can paint it on top of modeling chocolate. Airbrush it or hand paint it like I'm doing now. Okay, so see how that just really made those pieces pop while it's still being completely transparent. That's from the back, that's from the front. Now we are going to use some green for the leaves. Now you can use the color splash green, but just to show you guys even more painting techniques, I'm going to use, this is what is called holly from the sugar art. This is a petal dust. Okay, so I'm going to grab another brush. Let's do this one here. This one I'm going to mix with alcohol. You can mix them with dilution solution if you want, but the alcohol does dry a little bit faster for dust, so it really likes that. Alright, I'm going to mix, 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 make sure all of the little bits of color are broken up. And it's a nice sort of sagey green as well, this color. So you can make it super, super pretty. And again, I was going for something a little bit darker and a little bit more moody sort of themed. Get a little bit more dust in here and make it slightly darker because it's a little bit light right now. Now the thing with dust and alcohols or alcohol-based colors in general with Isomalt is it will dry matte. It'll dry a little bit sort of dull, but then once we glaze it with the clear edible glaze, it goes back to shiny. So it gives you a really beautiful sort of watercolored effect on top, but it will go back to shiny. So don't worry if it dries a little bit dull. It's just because it kind of melts away the surface of the Isomalt. And then as soon as you glaze it, it goes back to shiny. It doesn't melt it away enough to get rid of the detail or anything. It just dries so fast that you see that matteness before you would see the matteness in any of our water-based colors. Okay, so I just did a little bit of green for each gem, and I'm going fast with this. You guys can obviously take more time with it. And now we're going to go in with some silver. So the silver is going to be luster dust, so it's nice and shiny. Again, I'm using the Sugar Art New Silver. Alright, mix that. And we're going to go with a more detailed brush. I'm using a Innovative Sugarworks brush here. And scooping some of that silver out. I'm going to shade this a little bit darker than it'll look at first with some of our black petal dust in a little bit, but we're just going to start with a nice thick silver. So a lot of powder to liquid.
Sydney, I
Yeah.
froze. I just want to check
Oh.
that everybody else is still going.
My iPad is going.
Okay, that's okay. good scent.
Hopefully. Let me know, guys, if I am freezing or looking funky. Alright.
Could be my phone.
Mine's still going, so who knows.
I'm gonna pop out and then go back on.
Okay. I have to do that sometimes too.
Glad it's just me.
Okay, so I'm just taking that silver and I'm going around each of the little frames of the gems and in between everything. And the luster dust really helps, even if you just do a little bit of dry dusting on it, it really helps with intricate faceted molds like this to pop because it reflects the light. Because Isomalt is transparent, the light passes all the way through it, which means that the sometimes really fine details can get lost. But just a little bit of reflection on the surface really helps everything to look more defined. So even if you just do some dry pearl dust over your really detailed Isomalt pieces, it can help. It won't alter the color, but it just helps it to reflect. And so I'm just bringing that in between all of the facets of the leaves, facets of the petals. Alright. And then I'm going to age this a little bit and make it look slightly more shaded with some dark petal dust after this, but you could leave it bright if you wanted it to look a little bit more new and shiny rather than that deeper intensity. This also helps to just frame your gems and really make those pop. I think this would be beautiful in golds as well, or coppers or bronzes, but because I was doing blue and I wanted it to look a little bit more sort of space inspired or sort of kind of like lullaby inspired with those blues and the moon theme, I wanted to do silver because it was very kind of fitting into the theme that moon and space generally has. Okay. So I'm just going around very quickly. Again, you guys will go a little bit slower for this. And just kind of take your time going around each of those lines. So again, I'm just tracing the outlines of each petal. I'm tracing the outlines of each leaf, going around the sides. I'm not doing the underneath because I have another quick step for that once this is done that I want to show you. And I'm not doing the very center gem because I want that one to come out a little bit lighter, but you could do that one blue if you wanted. Or you can paint it any other color of your choosing. Check the comments here, make sure everything is good. Alright. Now it's looking good. Again, that silver might dry a little bit matte, but once we glaze it, it goes back to shiny. Alright, and now we'll take a little bit of our, oops, that's green, a little bit of our, I use Turkish black because it mixes down to a really, really nice black from the sugar art. So I'm just going to take a little bit of that Turkish black, just a drop or two of color. I'm going to use the same silver brush so it kind of gets some of the sparkle into the black. And if you're a little bit nervous about shading, if you're newer to it, you can start with more alcohol in there so that it is a lighter color, and that way you can build up the intensity as you figure out where it's going to go. But I'm just going to add a little bit of this here and there, not everywhere I put the silver, but at the deepest points. Anywhere that I want to add more shadow, so like in between the notches of the little gems around his center there. I'll put a little bit just in the nooks and crannies between each of the petals. There's kind of a low spot where the flower meets the vine of the leaves, so I'll put a little bit there. Put it in the crevices between petals on the outside edge. And this is just going to add contrast and make the whole thing pop. Plus it looks a little bit more vintage, a little bit more aged as well. And then I'm going to go back over with some silver as well, which helps to dull everything out. So don't worry about being messy with this because we're going to clean it up. Okay. Alright. And so this is kind of a crash course on shading, you know, and kind of getting those intricate details. I do have to go into it a little bit more in depth in a lot of my online workshops and my Zoom workshops that are up on my website. the pre-recorded ones as well. I do have an airbrushing basics workshop as well, so if you are newer to airbrushing or you want to learn the Dinky Doodle specifically, because that's the one that I use in the tutorial, that one is up there. And it's pre-recorded, so you can watch it at your own pace. Alright, so I'll just show you this before I clean it up with a little bit more silver. Okay, so it just added some sharpness to the piece, a little bit of depth, a little bit of darkness, and then we can go back. I'll use a slightly wider brush with the silver to just clean up some of the areas that maybe I got a little bit too dark, or maybe look a little bit too harsh. So I'll just cover, because luster dust, when it's thick enough with not too much alcohol in it, is pretty opaque. So I can cover up anything I don't like. I can smooth stuff over, make it look a little bit more cohesive again. Simple rule of thumb with shading is the high points are the highlights, so they're lighter, and then the low points are the shadows. So anything that's really deep within the texture of your piece is going to be more shadowed. With getting more intricate in that, of course, it depends on, where your light source is coming from and things like that. But when I'm just going for a basic shading effect, that's the rule I follow. Okay, so that silver is just cleaning everything up, making sure the edges are still nice and crisp. There we go. So it looks a little bit more put together. Now the last thing that I want to do for this brooch, is, other than we will glaze it, is I want to paint the back of it, because again with Isomalt the light passes through it, so we want something to make sure that the dark blue of the moon is not going to overtake any of the colors looking through it. So I'm going to actually take some of my base white now. You can thin this if you want, but I shouldn't need to. And I'm going to paint it over the back of the piece. Okay, so this is the back. And I'm just going to do a light layer of that. Doesn't need to be very much. And it doesn't even need to be perfect, because you're not going to see this really. You're just seeing the light reflecting through. But by doing this on the back, rather than painting the whole thing in white first, it still allows you to have that glassy depth looking through the piece. This really just reflects the light so that it bounces back off once the light goes through the glassiness, and it makes it look a little bit brighter. The white is really good for this because it does dry so fast and it's so thick, and you really only need one coat. You could use luster dust or pearl dust or something like that, but it takes a lot more coats to get this. As you can see, that was just one coat and it's pretty much opaque. If that was something that was going to be seen, I could add one more layer and it would brighten it up and make it a little bit more smooth. Okay, but now, no matter what goes behind it, it's not affecting the light going through because it's bouncing off of that white behind it. So you see how even when I put my darker hand behind it compared to on a white background, you don't see the difference in the colors changing like you did before. Okay, that'll of course take a minute to dry, but all my front pieces are dry, so I'm just gonna flip them over for a second. All right, and finally we are going to do our slight etching or highlighting of the etching with our green. So I'm going to take my fine brush again, add a little bit more alcohol to reactivate that green. And now this is really easy because you can kind of let the paint run in the lines because it's kind of has its own little track to run through. So like dropping ink onto a wet page, it kind of knows where to go. The same thing with this. So I'm just guiding it into place. The more you put in, the darker it will be, or of course you can affect the darkness of your paint with the amount of powder to alcohol ratio you do. So more powder, the darker the lines will be. And you see how it's kind of running itself down those lines, and I'm just adding more and spreading it where it needs it. But you see already how much darker those areas are, and I'll hold that up as kind of a before and after once I get some more done here. But then you don't have to worry about your hand being steady, drawing straight lines. And it just kind of does it for you. I'm all about efficiency and speed, especially in a bakery setting. Time is money, so any little tricks and things that I can give you guys that I've found, I always try and share because we always want the easiest way to get really nice effects when you are in you know, making more quantities of things and wanting them to look as consistent as possible. But of course you can spend a lot more time on this if you're doing something for like a competition or your own personal work that you really want to showcase your skills. Okay, so you can see these pieces here that I just painted compared to the ones that I haven't painted yet. It brings in the green. It's a little bit easier to see the green in person because my lights are very cool, so they're kind of cooling it off, but the green stands out really nicely with the blue without being too different that it looks like it doesn't match. Make up a little bit more green here. Okay, the key with this, if you do want it to be able to run in all the veins, is to have a lot of alcohol on your brush or a lot of alcohol in the cavity of your palette, because if there's not enough liquid, it won't run. So I'm really loading up the brush. I'm not wiping any off at all, and then just guiding it with the tip of my brush down those lines. And you can use the color splash for this as well, so if you wanted to use the green, the Envy Green color splash and do this, you definitely could. Again, I just wanted to show you some different alternatives and options, so if you don't have the color splash, you can definitely still use what you have. Alright, and then going into my little leaves. You can also just hand paint this, so if you wanted to. I would probably add some of the base white into this green if I was going to just hand paint it without the carvings, because again, the carvings added depth, so it added it already defined, we're just further defining it. And if you don't already have the base definition to go off of, these are going to be much more faint and much more light. So I would probably add some of the base white into this dark green, even if it's going to stay a dark green. The base white's adding the opacity to make sure that it pops over top of the blue. Okay. Sorry, I'm right-handed. I'm trying to do it so you guys can see, but kind of have to cover it up for some angles. Alright. And so we are almost there. I tried to go for a very artsy sort of artistic interpretation, but also just artistic expression. So I'm not really trying to be as perfectly smooth and the lines perfectly even and not, you know, a little bit wobbly here and there. I have a couple little spots that are not the most perfect, but I went with that sort of interpretation because I think it looks pretty. I think that it's kind of adds to it for something like this, especially because when painting directly onto a cookie, it already has texture. I mean, it has the texture of the cookie. It's very matte. It has some little like creases and cracks in it here and there. And I didn't worry about those because I feel like it just makes it look more natural. And because this is a very nature-inspired piece, it just goes along with it being a little bit less perfect. And I like that look of it having more personality. So I went with more texture, more imperfection to really showcase the fact that this is handmade. And if you look at a lot of like, especially wood-burned sort of themes, you know, of pieces, like if you look at actual wood pieces that have been wood-burned and engraved, they have that very sort of rustic look most of the time. And so I thought that it would just really, really make it look in that same vein. Alright, and then to add the brooch onto the moon, I'm going to use a little bit of Isomalt. So let me pop my Isomalt back into the microwave. I'll hold this up so you can see. So you see that not only made all of the vines pop, it also added that slight tint of green and definition. And just came out really, really nice. Alright, guys doing okay? Anybody have any questions so far? So I just popped this in for about 30 seconds. I'm going to do 30 more seconds there. Close these up. So all of these steps really, really were fast. So you imagine doing different projects with this, different themes. You know, you could kind of do an alternate or even pair it with this and do like a sun. You know, you could do a very sort of like spirally engraved sun. Would look very, very pretty. You can really do anything with this, but again, I just wanted to go with something very kind of flowy and nature inspired, and how fast all of these techniques came together to make this piece. All right. So I'm going to figure out where I want this first. Okay, I'm going to pour a little bit of my Isomalt right onto the cookie. You can also use chocolate or royal icing, but I have Isomalt right here, and it's going to be nice and strong. I have a second or two to adjust where it's going to go, just like that. And we'll just let that cool for a second on there. This one I actually really like that it came out a little bit inverted, so because I did the moon a little bit darker, it makes the brooch look lighter in comparison, whereas this one is the light cookie with the darker brooch, and I really like that sort of parallel. I think it came out really pretty. So, you know, even having these together would look really, really nice. But if you, let's say, did that darker like I did, but then you decided you really, really want it to be lighter, these are opaque paints, so all you have to do is create a lighter blue and then go over the dark blue, okay? Even if the blue is super, super dark and almost like a navy tint, as long as you have that base white in there, it is completely like a clean slate. It's like primer. When you're priming a wall, it just completely covers it. You could even do a layer of just white over the whole entire thing, and then you can paint over whatever colors you want, just like you would prime a wall. I do that with cakes. If I have dummy cakes that I want to reuse, or maybe I was experimenting and I really don't like the color combination that I tried at first, you can definitely completely airbrush it with white, or just mix your base white into your color that you want, and it creates that opaque paint that just goes over the top. Okay. Alright, so we have that all assembled now, and I will probably go back and tweak the painting on that a little bit just so it comes out a little bit more crisp like this one did. But that last step is going to be glazing. So glazing is really important with the Isomalt. The cookie you can leave as is if you want, but the glaze does help to lock in the paint so that it doesn't come off on your fingers, and it'll also just make sure that the moisture doesn't affect the Isomalt, plus make the whole thing really shiny and pretty. Now, you could glaze the brooch before you put it on the cookie if you don't want the cookie to have a slight shine to it, because this will add shine to anything edible. I'm going to go ahead and do this over my bin next to me so that I don't get it on you guys because the glaze will spread, but I want to show you how pretty and shiny it'll be once you glaze over the top. So I'm just going to give this a spray off to the side. Okay, and that would take a couple minutes to dry, of course, but just adds that really nice shininess to it. And you can kind of see it when the light hits it, how sparkly and pretty that is. But really going with that dark blue from the brown that we were at is really all thanks to the base white. So you can see on this one going a little bit lighter, you have more of that sort of like ethereal blue, very much like a sky. And I really like these together. I did the same thing on the stars. So when I cut out my cookies, I just airbrushed them with the blue, the darker blue. So I used the blue that I went around the edge with. I just airbrushed them with the darker blue. You could even splatter some of the base white onto them to create like a little speckle texture, like stars in the sky. You could do that on the big one too if you did a darker cookie, maybe like a deep navy blue or like a deep purple would be pretty. And then you could just splatter it with the base white as soon as the blue is dry, and it just will bring a really, really pretty sort of look to your piece. Alright, so what do you guys think? That is my moon cookie. We have the Isomalt accent, we have the airbrushing on it, the hand painting, and the carving with the Ziodo. I really think that the carving with the Ziodo pen brings this piece to life. I just think that it's such a unique look that gives you so much texture, especially in person when you pick it up and feel it. It just has that really, really cool, unique look that you can't really get any other way. Plus, you have so many ways to customize it. You can write things onto the surface, you can draw like I did, you know, obviously vines and leaf patterns work really well with this design, but you could really do anything that you want. You could draw on waves, you can draw on clouds. Clouds would be super pretty with this sort of look, you know, add some clouds in the background or maybe do some cloud cookies around it. The sky is the limit to whatever your creativity is telling you. Oh, I'm so glad you guys like it. Let's see, Michelle says, I can definitely see this technique with Christmas cookies. Oh, that would be so pretty. I love it.
Santa cookies.
Giant Santa cookies, that would be beautiful. You could do some like ornaments around it and engrave the lines, like the twists and things. That would be so, so pretty.
I've seen the moon turned into Santa, and they put the
Oh, that would be super
the
pretty.
top of his hat.
Yeah, oh my gosh. Okay, you guys are going to have to do this, and you're going to have to send me all of your design ideas because I know you're going to come up with some beautiful, beautiful things. All right, do you guys have any other questions for me of using the airbrush, using the Yoda Pen, the color splash, the cookie, anything like that? Let me know. If you guys are watching this afterwards, if you're watching the playback, you are more than welcome to send me a message here on the Simi page. You can send it to my personal Sidney Galpern account. You can email me, Instagram message, anything like that. I'm always available to answer any questions that you have. I also put all of these onto YouTube as well afterwards, so if you want to see any of my past pieces, or if you watch this live and then you want to go back and reference something, you can check that out on my YouTube channel. It's just under my name, Sidney Galpern. So if you're watching there, feel free to send me any of your questions in the description box on the YouTube video. I have all of my info for my social media, so you can always get a hold of me. I also want to give you guys a sneak peek of what we are doing for the next Playdate for next month, because it is something really, really, really extra exciting. So I have a banner here of the piece that I'm going to be showing you guys. So that is going to be, I do a Playdate every month, a live Playdate, and the next one is going to be our Isomalt carousel. So this is perfect for a circus theme, a carnival theme. This is 100% made out of Isomalt, and the cool part about this live stream is we are teaming up with the frosting creators in San Antonio. They are having their live events, so they are going to have so many different live events happening on, let's switch this here. Mine is going to be on May 15th, but the whole event is going to be a virtual day of sharing show for the Frosting Creators of San Antonio, as you can see. So it is happening May 15th, that's a Sunday, and the 16th, Monday. And look at all these absolutely incredible artists that they are having demonstrate throughout the entire day. You can go and watch on their Facebook page. I will post about this after this live, and I'll post all the links and everything to tell you guys where to go to watch it, and I'll share it as well as long as I'm able to. So you can see, I believe there's 10 demonstrators on Sunday and 6 on Monday, which is just absolutely incredible. So many different techniques. I can see really wide array of demonstrators and artists who are going to be showing lots of different mediums, lots of different techniques, you know, painting, sculpting, cookie, cake, everything. So really make sure that you tune into that, because it is an incredible event being put on by the Frosting Creators, and I was so happy that they invited me to do this. I'm super honored to be a part of it. So make sure that you tune into my demo. It's going to be on Sunday, May 15th at 2:45 p.m. EST or CST, which is 3:45 p.m. EST. Yes, I got those right. And I'm going to be creating, like I said, that carousel all out of Isomalt. And yeah, I do have it here. If do you want to grab it? And I trust you. You can do it. Hold it by the bottom once it's off. You can kind of slide it. Yeah. So I have the piece here. I will show you.
If I don't break it.
Mom's bringing it over to me very nicely. Thank you. And it's actually pretty big, so it would be perfect for a cake topper. Here we go. And this is 100% Isomalt. So from top to bottom, we are putting it all together using one of our Simi sculpture mats. So I'm going to show you how to use those, how to put everything together. We're going to be putting it on a rotating base, painting everything. So that is going to be the next Playdate. If you want to get the accessory kit, we do a discounted accessory kit with this and the mats to make this and the Isomalt that you'll need for it. It's up on my website now, so if you're interested in following along or watching and then making it the project yourself, that is up on my website right now. And I'm super... Yeah, you could make it in cookie for sure using the sculpture mat, and really in different mediums as well. So I'm going to be going all over that during the live demo. I'll just set it over here. All right, and then the other live event that I have happening this month is going to be my Zoom class. So I have an online class. I do a new project just about every month, and this month we are making a blown Isomalt snail. He is going to be so much fun. I cannot wait for this. The snail is blown on the shell, and then he's hand pulled and sculpted. It's all Isomalt. Are you making the leaf, the little ladybug friends to go with him? That one is an online workshop, so it is something that you'll need to sign up for to reserve your spot. We do it on Zoom, but if you can't make the Zoom, I also record a pre-recorded high-quality version of the tutorial that every student gets regardless of if you do the live class or not. So if you can join us for the live class, it's April 24th at 12 p.m. EST. That's a Sunday, but if you can't, within a week after that class, I will film and edit the tutorial, and you will get that so you can watch it at any pace. You know, do it in your own environment. And I have the snail as well here, so I'll show you him. I am so excited about this class. Oh my gosh, look at his little face. So this is all Isomalt, and as you can see, the shell is blown. I'm using a original technique that I came up with for striping colors into the blown Isomalt, similar to doing blown glass. So we are going to be creating the shells that way, and then hand sculpting and painting his whole body and his little environment that he's going to be in. So that one is on the 24th, but you will get a recorded version as well within a week of that class if you sign up. So you can also just do it at your own pace, and it's going to be so much fun. I cannot wait for that class. But yeah, both of those are on my website now if you want to sign up. But the Frosting Creators one, you can sign up, or you can watch through them. So I will share all the info about that right after this so that you can see how to watch. Right, do we have any questions or anything before we go?
Krista Johansson said she can't wait to get her Yoda Pen and use it on her gingerbread creation.
Oh, make sure to tag me in pictures. I cannot wait to see what you do. Yeah, if anybody uses any of these techniques, tag me in pictures. I would love, love, love to see it. If you're not a member of the Simi Torch Team Facebook group, make sure to join and post your pictures there because it's super fun seeing everybody's different interpretations of all the classes and projects that we do. And anything Isomalt, super duper fun. And the Yoda Pen also has a group as well, a Facebook page and a support group, the Yoda Pen support group, where you can post pictures and get tons of design ideas and inspiration too. So make sure to check that out. Myra is awesome. She's always posting new tutorials and things of using the Yoda Pen with different mediums as well, which is really cool to see all the different stuff you can do with it.
But it's just going to be a Playdate next month.
Yes. So we are going to be doing the Playdate of the carousel, and that is the main thing that we are doing next month. So we're not actually doing a Zoom class in May because we are having our Simi retreat. The Simi retreat is going to be May 3rd and 4th here in Melbourne, Florida. It is an in-person event, and so the tickets for that are already gone, but we do have a wait list. So if you're interested in joining us here in Florida on May 3rd and 4th, we do have a wait list, so just contact me for that. But we're going to be doing some really fun stuff. So if you can't make the retreat next month, we are going to be having some really fun stuff coming up this summer, possibly like a summer camp sort of event online. Yeah, so it's open to everybody. So make sure to keep your ears and eyes peeled for that, and we will post about that as soon as we have more info. So no Zoom class next month, but we are going to be having this really, this project is a bigger project for the Playdate, so, and for the Frosting Creators event, so it's definitely going to be a fun one if you want to follow along and do the project, and it's live on Facebook, so you can watch it from wherever you are and work in your own environment. All right, so, and all good? Everything looking good?
Great, thanks. Myra posted her Yoda Facebook group.
Awesome. Yes, you can go in there and click the link and join the Yoda Pen group because it is so much fun. You can ask questions, and yeah, it gets tons of inspiration on there. All right, well, thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope that you enjoyed this live demo. Make sure to join me for my next one. I'll be posting about that as soon as I get off of here, so I'll post all the info on how to join us for that amazing Frosting Creators live event online. And yeah, I hope that you guys enjoyed and have a fantastic rest of your weekend. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.